Hello, good afternoon on this very warm Saturday afternoon here. And wherever you are in the world and you're joining us, thank you so much. This is In Conversation with Wesley, Leon Aroozoo, and Miki Hawkinson. This online panel is held as part of Open Books I Want to Go Home, presented as part of Light Tonight Festival 2021. Open Books are the Arts House's signature program where selected literary works are adapted into visual art presentations. And this year's selected text is I Want to Go Home by local author and filmmaker Wesley Leon Arouzoo. Now, a quick note, we will be having a short Q&A session towards the later part of this afternoon. So during this conversation, if you have any questions for the speakers, please post them in the comments section. If you're joining us from YouTube or Facebook, you can put it in either one of those. And we will try to address as many questions as we can during the Q&A segment. So before we begin, a very quick round of introductions. My name is Muhammad Shafubari, and I am the moderator for this afternoon. And before we jump straight into the talk, a quick bio. Although you might already know Wesley and Miki, but I thought it'd be nice to just do a quick bio introduction of them as well. So Wesley is a multidisciplinary artist with 13 little pictures and a lecturer in charge at LaSalle College of the Arts. His works span disciplines and genres, which includes the literary work I Want to Go Home, published by Math Press. And that was accompanied with a film rendition, which was nominated for the Massenet Award at the Busan International Film Festival in 2017. His other literary work, Bedok Reservoir, was brought to life for stage and performed at the Goodman Arts Center as well. And Wesley has received his Master of Fine Arts in Dramatic Writing from New York University, Tisch, Asia, and most recently, he was shortlisted for the Epigram Books Fiction Prize 2021 for his novel The Punkawala and the Prostitute, which will be published very soon. So keep a lookout for that as well. And of course, our second speaker, we have Miki Hawkinson. And Miki was born in Osaka and now lives and works in Melbourne, where she is joining us from this evening as well. She is a member of the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators and operates as an independent interpreter and translator. She is a research officer and teaching associate at Monash University, where she translates research materials and teaches Japanese language, interpreting, and translation to a postgraduate level. Among her many successful projects, Miki was the interpreter for the documentary film I Want to Go Home and translator for the novel of the same title. And that's what we are here for today, to talk about I Want to Go Home. I am one of those readers out there who has also read the book a few years ago and fell in love with it. And I'm sure some of you who are joining us this afternoon have also read the book and even seen the documentary film as well. I have not had the privilege of watching the documentary film just yet, but I'm sure I'll get a chance to do so, right, Wesley, at some point? So I'm going to jump into it. I'm gonna, I think this afternoon we'll go on a bit of a journey talking about the experiences of the process of creating I guess more the book, and then also talking about some reflections, and then also about just future thinking about stuff around that as well. So for those of us who have followed the journey, we probably have heard that Wesley first came across Mr. Takamatsu's story in a Daily Telegraph article, and you shared in interviews about how you were very interested to talk to Mr. Takamatsu. I guess the curiosity is what about that story made you feel compelled to want to pursue talking to Mr. Takamatsu, and then eventually it becoming a novel, a documentary as well.
I think for me, when I read the article on the Daily Telegraph, it gripped me tremendously. There was something about it and something about Mr. Takamatsu's story that I found very inspiring. So at that point in time, I think it was in 2013, and it was an online article, the one I read, and the Daily Telegraph one. And For me, I just wanted to reach out to him, almost just to say hello and also to talk to him. But of course, that's difficult because how do I reach out to him? So it took a while, getting the journalist who wrote the article and finding Mr. Takamatsu's contact. After a while, after some rounds of persuading, the journalist spoke to Mr. Takamatsu and said like, okay, sure, you can speak to him. And then came a problem because I don't speak Japanese and Mr. Takamatsu doesn't speak much English as well. So we're gonna have a language barrier. So I was very lucky because I was introduced to Miki through a friend, and Miki came on board very willingly to help out with translation. So how this happened was I would write a email letter to Mr. Takamatsu, and Miki would then translate it, and then this letter will be sent to Mr. Takamatsu. So we basically talked over email for 2 years before we even went to Onagawa to meet up with him. And that's when me, Miki, and my student at that time, John, had just enough funds to go there and meet him and do the project that we wanted to do. But I think it took us a while. I think me and Miki took us a while where we I think I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but it took also a while when we realized that his story is much deeper than the two-page article that came out in the Daily Telegraph. So yeah, that's how the projects came about.
Yeah, and is that kind of something that you've been doing with previous projects where you pursue a lead, and traveling all the way to Japan to kind of, interview, someone and to make them a part of your work?
No, it was actually really out of my comfort zone actually to go all the way to Japan to meet someone who you never met before in person. But I'm really lucky because Miki was there on the trip with me, and Miki was without Miki, this trip would not have been possible by far. It would not have been possible at all. Miki was not only the translator between me and Mr. Takamatsu, but I think Miki was there to also almost like take care of me and John. So she was always there making sure like, okay, yeah. So I think Miki can share more about her experience with us as well in Onagawa. But yeah, it would not be possible without Miki.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I think, I wanted to ask Miki, about that. What was it like for you, Miki, when you first received the invitation to be involved with the project? I think we're curious, or at least I'm curious to know, what was the starting point of Wesley approaching you. He said that you were willingly, to come on board. Did he have to do a lot of convincing to get you on board? How do you feel, working? Yeah.
No, he didn't need to do much because what he just told me was quite touching, and then I could feel his passion through his writing via email, and I thought that's very um, valuable and it's something special that he was doing, and how he was moved and touched by the story of Mr. Takamatsu. And I thought I was quite, honored to be a part of the project. So I was quite happy that Wesley found me and contacted me.
Yeah, in terms of the exchanges that occurred via email, right? So,
Yeah.
in terms of that communication, would it be Wesley would email you and then you would email Mr. Takamatsu,
Yes.
or would it be you translate and then send it back to Wesley and then Wesley sent it to Mr. Takamatsu? Sorry,
So what happened
logistical
was
question.
Wesley sent me his letter to me. I translated and email back to Wesley, so he can personally send that translated letter directly to Mr. Takamatsu. So the communication was basically between Wesley and Mr. Takamatsu,
Mm.
and then Wesley received the reply from Mr. Takamatsu, and then I send that to me, and then I translate and then send it back to Wesley.
Wow, I think that is quite a process to undergo, right? I think, and that went on for some time, right? I guess the curious question, as someone who has read the book and fallen in love with the book as well, is I know it could be more personal and whatnot, but just out of curiosity, might you have or have you ever considered revealing or publishing perhaps some of those email exchanges that occurred?
Never occurred to us actually, but much some of the content from the emails are in the book, especially when I talk about like, oh, in the past when we talked about this, and then I'll mention it. But I don't think we could publish those emails with Mr. Takamatsu. Maybe not all, maybe some, like a preview would be okay, because I think some of the things we talked about might have some content which we feel may not be um, for Mr. Takamatsu's privacy. So yeah, but there weren't much of it. But I think if I look back, I think there's a few. Yeah, but yeah, something to think about. Good idea.
Yeah, no. Thanks for answering that. It's almost putting you in a spot with that question. But I thought, I think it'd be quite interesting also. But I guess it's that journey of that labor of love. This endeavor that you all have that the team has embarked on, led to the novel, led to a documentary film, and to my understanding, you have mentioned in an interview before that it was always that the book would come first and then the documentary. But then what happened was that both of them have kind of taken a life of their own and have had their own following, and still talked about today, a few years after they've been produced. I guess maybe the first question around that I wanted to ask Wesley was, what differences were there between the book and the documentary that maybe you could just share about?
Sure. So the book and documentary do have some stark differences in terms of its approach. So the book follows mainly the journey of me, Miki, and John to Onagawa, and then meeting Mr. Takamatsu. So the book is almost like 70% Mr. Takamatsu, 30% me, Mickey, and John. So there's a bit of our journey there and our worries that we had when we were meeting him, and obstacles we faced as well as a group, and also about how meeting him has changed our lives. So that was in the book. But the documentary one is more of a straight cut profile piece on Mr. Takamatsu, where there's no mention of me, Mickey, or John in the documentary at all. You don't see us at all as well. So I would say generally the documentary is a little bit more boring because not because it doesn't have us, but it's more traditional in its approach. Yeah. So, but the book is a little bit more of a mini adventure to some degree. And I think what the book does that's different from the documentary is that the approach to meeting Mr. Takamatsu sometimes is a little bit more comfortable for some people as opposed to watching the documentary where he is just presented as it is. Because I think some people might share the same thoughts that me, Mickey, and John might have as well, or things that we're thinking about when we're going on this journey. So very different stuff. But it's kind of cool because some people, some readers or viewers, seen the documentary first and then read the book, while some read the book and then seen the documentary. So it's interesting to see which one they like more. But generally, when I talk to someone and go like, "Oh, I'm doing this project. Would you like to read the book?" I'm always trying to sell the book. So I'm like, "Do you want to read the book? I'll pass you a copy." So, and then they're like, "Can I watch a documentary instead?" So generally, I think people like to watch stuff than read stuff. But hopefully, I see it changing. So that's good.
That's quite interesting to hear, right, about the different access points in terms of people wanted to access the story as well, because obviously you're sharing that both provided a different kind of entry point into the story of Mr. Takamatsu. I guess, was there something more that you felt that you wanted to capture with the book that you maybe have not? Since we're talking about you wanting to kind of get people to read it, to read more than doing the watching, and what was it, perhaps, if there was one thing that you felt that you wanted to capture more of?
For the book, I wished we had more time to spend with Mr. Takamatsu in Onagawa, but I actually have a bit more regrets, not regrets, but hopes, things that I wish I did for the documentary. So the book was always the primary project. The documentary was more of like a secondary thing. So not much effort went into its pre-production side. Um, and looking at it, because I never expected the documentary to go further than what I expected it to do. I always planned it to like, okay, when I'm done in the documentary, I'm just going to put it on YouTube. That was the plan, actually, to be honest. But then it was picked up by Busan Film Fest, and then he went on his own journey. So because of that, I wish I had more budget for the documentary. I wish I could have brought another one or two more crew members to assist John, because John was the sole videographer, sound. He did everything. So basically, he shot like everything. So yeah, and for one person to do that is pretty crazy. And he was at that point in time, he was still a student. And for student to do a 60-minute documentary is really out of this world. So really proud of John. Like, I'm not sure how it even happened. But I wish I had more budget for the documentary, and hopefully things would have been a little bit different. But it's still a nice documentary, but could have been better.
Of course, I mean, maybe a sequel. Who knows? Down the road, who knows? Who knows? You
Yeah.
know, yeah, I mean, still focusing on the idea of both the book and the documentary. I wanted to ask Miki. You were involved in, as we discussed earlier, the translation of that communication between Wesley and Mr. Takamatsu in the email, right, correspondence. You also were involved during the translation, and obviously that comes out in the documentary as well, right? And eventually, even also translating the book itself. What was the experience of doing so like for you?
That was a quite interesting journey for me as a translator and interpreter. When I started to translate the email communications, that was like I was just doing my job as a translator, and then so both of them can have conversation and communication. And then also I started to get to know what Mr. Takamatsu is like. That's as much as Wesley was finding out from Mr. Takamatsu, I was finding out some information about him too. So I was, I don't know, this is the right word, but I was quite excited to know him, and then all the stories, and then all the happiness, and then pain and sadness, and then everything. And then I thought I was quite prepared. I have background knowledge and then everything before I went to Onagawa with Wesley and John to perform as an interpreter on site. And but it was a little bit different experience for me because, yes, information-wise, I knew it, but just be on site and then just seeing what happened to Onagawa and what happened to people and how people live in there, and it's still recovering. And a little, how many years was it? It's 3-4 years past. Yeah, and then it's still not fully recovered, and still we can see the scars as such, and all the damages and debris, and so it was really different. It's different from watching that on the news or reading the news articles. It's just seeing that with your own eyes. It's something powerful and very difficult to digest as well. So I had a different approach or different stance as an interpreter. It's not just the information and communication, but it's just also physically feeling what they've been going through now before I make a word out of it. And then I received the original book from Wesley to translate, and I was so looking forward to receiving it, but it was when I read it, I said, "Am I in a book as a story, the part of the story?" So I was okay. And then I was reading through it, but it really, like, all the journey we went through together was nicely laid out, and then very emotional. It's like waves, like Wesley used the waves word in a book as well. But it's like, for me, it's just the emotion, and then all that stories just comes up and down like a nice waves when I was reading through. So I was like huge. I am a big fan of his book, but I try to do my best to represent the same feeling in Japanese.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting thing, because if you're usually translating a novel, for example, it's a story, right? Or it's someone else's story most of the time. And then in this case, although Wesley had written that, you were a part of it, and then now you're having to relieve that as well. Relieve those moments while also thinking, out of curiosity, did you kind of like, were there things that Wesley maybe had written about what you had said or done that you tweaked in the translation without telling Wesley?
No, that's not right. It's not professional. So even though I need to swallow something, I need to just present what Wesley tried to present. But he didn't write anything not nice about me. So, but interesting thing was, I was having a conversation with Wesley in English as he wrote in his book. But now
Yes.
I need to translate what I said in English into Japanese. Now I need to come up with my own word in my mother tongue. So that was very interesting experience for me. What would I say? I was thinking.
I think that's the beauty of that as well, because I think for us, when we as a reader, right, kind of reads that, we don't maybe necessarily in that moment really think about the complexity of that journey itself, and I think that's produced in itself a beautiful kind of product, so to speak. uh, yeah, I think, and as you were sharing, Miki, about Onagawa, and about a little bit about the time there, I'd like for us to perhaps go back in time to Onagawa for a moment, back to first encounters, to the time spent together, to the process of it all. And I wanted to ask Miki first. What was it like for you spending time with Mr. Takamatsu?
Um, for me, it's just special to know him, and to have the opportunity to see what he's actually doing, like um, you know, visiting his house, and then it's just seeing his, his life, and then watching him dive, and what he's been doing every week. It's it's for me. It's Without Wesley, I wouldn't have that kind of special, precious moment with Mr. Takamatsu. And then he was not on. I couldn't tell the his personality 100% by translating his email correspondence, but just seeing him, it's just how I could see how strong he is, and how gentle and kind, and it's just amazing person. So I was quite honored to see him.
And I think it's again, right, going back to the idea of sometimes in the process of translating, you're a bit distant from the subject, that you're, and in this case you were involved from the correspondence, and then also being there, and then later translating, and I guess, did how did that kind of contribute, how did the time spent with him contribute to your translation process as well? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Not only the Mr. Takamatsu, but meeting Wesley in person was very special as well. As a translator, you always need to think about the character, how this person will talk, what he's like. You can feel that from the story, but meeting in person, you can just get it. You can feel it, and then spending time with Wesley, having conversation. Not only the interpreting part of the conversation, but it's just chit chat with him. You can just feel what kind of person, how he talks, and what kind of wording he used. So it was a very good opportunity for me to meet Wesley, John, and Mr. Takamatsu in person in Onagawa in that actual site. And then I could come up with John's character pretty well as well. Without meeting him, I couldn't come up with the character. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And the same question to Wesley as well, right? What was it like spending time with Mr. Takamatsu, and then of course with Miki as well? Because that was the first encounter in person.
It was a really good experience for me. Mr. Takamatsu is definitely one of the most important persons in my life, who has really changed the way I look at things in life, or changed me as a person. I find him extremely inspiring. I think about him all the time. Meeting him in person, it was nerve wracking, definitely for me. Prior to meeting Mr. Takamatsu, I don't think I'm the best with meeting people and striking up conversations. So, and then now you're going to spend a week with him. It's scary, right? So, I was very nervous. In fact, I think like a few days prior to to the time when we went to Onagawa, we actually did not get a reply from Mr. Takamatsu. We emailed him something and he has not replied us. So we were a little bit worried, because we were worried that we'll go to Onagawa and then he's like not there. We're like, oh, he doesn't want to meet us anymore. But at the same time, thinking about that, I felt a little bit relieved, because I felt like, oh, you know what, maybe I don't have to meet him then. Maybe, what, I tried my best, but I couldn't meet him. This project won't get done. I won't have to meet him for one whole week. So there was that kind of thing following behind. So, but good thing is that we did meet him. He did reply us in the end. But spending time with him was very, very, very special. I'm following him on his diving as well. Seeing him get into his gear, seeing how focused he is. Yeah, I think he's an amazing man, and he's still diving up to today as well.
And actually, you've kind of ventured into my next question, as well, which is, as a reader, you do mention in the book about the two of you kind of watching him dive, and then wondering whether he was okay, and but the image, right? What was it like watching Mr. Takamatsu dive for the very first time? You know the story, you've been following it, and then now you could see it for yourself, and that visceral image of him diving for the first time. What was it like watching that? And I wanted to ask both of you the question as well.
It was a interesting experience, but also a very cold and wet experience, because when he was diving, it was raining pretty heavily, and so me, John, and Mickey were on land. He was diving by the like a pier, coastal area, and then so it was raining. We were really cold, and it was kind of cool because Mr. Takamatsu has he has a little camera on his on his head, so we can record what he's seeing. And so when he goes before he goes into the water, we can see what he's seeing on our phones, like that's connected to it. But once he's more than maybe 10 seconds into the water, as he's going deeper, it'll just cut because we don't have the signal. And then we're like, okay, then you only get to watch it later on when you bring the footage back. So for Mr. Takamatsu, he doesn't just dive to search for his wife, but he was also part of the team that searches for materials and objects that may belong to other family members. So they might find, for example, a necklace, or this belongs to someone's family member. So that's a great thing to do as well. So it's only until later when we went back to the hotel, and then we managed to see through the footage, and then we could see what he is seeing. And because it was raining, so of course the view wasn't as clear as it can be. And then you could feel like, wow, even though the waves were quite not calm, it was raining, it was wet, it was cold, but he still went through with it. Even in the murky waters, he still was searching. So I found that very inspiring.
What about you, Miki? What was it like watching him, dive?
If I really admire his, effort, and I was quite amazed that wow, he's doing this every week. And as Wesley said, that was really, it was beginning of the summer, but it was really cold with the heavy rain. And it, you know, it was not the issue for Mr. Takamatsu. And he just does it every week. And I clearly remember when I was seeing him going down the water, and then I remember the color of that sea. And then that's the color of the first print of the book, that dark green color. So every time I saw that, yes, yes.
Okay.
And
That's
every time
weird
I
to
see
remember.
that color, reminds me that day that he was diving, the determination.
And I guess that image still sticks with the both of you today.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Then if I mean that's obviously one memory from the time in Onagawa that I think would resonate, right? I was curious whether there were other memories that still resonate vividly with you today. If I were to ask you to close your eyes and think of that moment and arrive at that moment, what would that moment be?
I can share first. For me, I think seeing how Onagawa was like back in 2015 um, definitely affected me, because I knew Onagawa was devastated from the tsunami, and I knew that okay there was help in terms of bringing it back to life. But 2015 was 4 years after the tsunami tragedy, and I was quite shocked to see, like, for example, the police station was still in a cargo container. So things were still very much not permanent. They were still in the works. There was still just debris, and I mean the land was just basically flat, but there were no new houses being built. And I think today I'm not really caught up with much with Onagawa, but from what I've seen over the last few years, there's been a few more shops springing up there, so that's great to see. The train station was already there when we were there. There's a bit more life there, but I'm not too sure how close is it to the original Onagawa with pre 2011. I'm not too sure about that, but seeing it was a visually impactful in a sad way.
And then what about you, Miki?
Um, yeah, same with Wesley, that how Onagawa was that time was quite vividly um, in my heart, but also that I I saw a light pole, a huge light pole, was bent like more than 90-degree, like somebody just like bended a straw or something, like a kinked straw. It's that told me how strong, how awful that tsunami was. The power of the tsunami was showing that, like, the huge light pole just could bend like that easy. And then it was still there in 2015. So it was really, I was feeling that seeing Onagawa view, but when I saw that, I was really scared, like shivering that power of the tsunami, and imagine how people felt that time.
This 11th of March this year will be the 10th year since the Great East Japan earthquake and the tsunami hit Onagawa, and I was just curious, as we are kind of getting the both of you to reflect on your time in Onagawa. Following that 1 week trip, have either of you visited Onagawa since?
For me, I've not visited Onagawa since, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. And hopefully in the coming years, I'll be able to do that. Of course, it's a little bit difficult because I have troubles communicating with Mr. Takamatsu, so there'll be a problem. And yeah, so that'll be an issue, but it's something that I always wanted to do, or at least to see Onagawa for itself, and see how it's doing. Hopefully in time to come.
Yeah. What about you, Miki? Have you been back?
No, unfortunately, I haven't got the chance after that either. And then, like Wesley, I really want to go back there one day soon. Maybe we can go there together, Wesley.
Yeah. It's gonna be nice.
He was setting it up when he replied
Yeah.
me so that you can say that without him asking.
Yeah.
It's a trip.
I look after you again.
I mean, and even with you both not being able to have gone back yet, right? And then with the current situation that we're in, with the pandemic that has hit us, are the both of you still in touch with Mr. Takamatsu?
Yes, we do share updates with Mr. Takamatsu. If there's like bite-sized updates, we share over social media. Recently, we shared images of the open books event with him, shared with him articles. There was an article on Singer Life, I believe, and that was in Japanese, so we shared it with him and you can read it. But when we have something a little bit bigger to talk to him about and to ask him, how's everything going? That's usually when Miki gets more involved, when Miki I have to bother Miki to translate again, and Miki will translate the emails, and then we'll touch base with him and ask how he's doing. Yeah, so we do keep in touch with him. Yeah, so in fact, Miki just helped to translate one of Mr. Takamatsu's messages just yesterday. Yeah, so yeah, maybe Miki can share with you what Mr. Takamatsu mentioned in the message.
Yeah, Miki.
He'll be he'll be joining us today. His message was that he'll be watching this live.
If you're joining us live, Mr. Takamatsu,
Mr.
hello.
Takamatsu.
Yeah, do like, and then we know that that you're also with us today. What I mean, Miki, when Musli talks about him kind of staying in touch with Mr. Takamatsu, and then you are still involved in that process of translating. Out of curiosity, have you also been in touch with Mr. Takamatsu beyond that? Yourself, yeah.
I didn't feel right to contact him, so I haven't. But me and Mr. Takamatsu connected on Facebook, so we can check each other and liking that. So yeah, so that's my conversation with Mr. Takamatsu for now.
Right. And in these years that have since passed, well, uh, have either of you thought about potentially taking up diving or even joining in? I think in the book you did mention, Wesley, about feeling that you missed out on that you would have loved to have gone in. Is that something that you still kind of feel about?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to learn how to dive. But I'm also a bit afraid of water, of the sea. But anyway, but I did have a chance to like dive with like dolphins. Not dive, like scuba snorkel with dolphins like 2 years ago. Close enough. But yeah, that's as far as I've got. But hopefully, I'll have that chance one day.
Yep. I think that would be lovely. I think if you get that chance one day, I am sure we all would like to know more and read more about that experience. Also, for sure. Uh, One of the moments that has stuck with me as a reader is when Mr. Takamatsu finally shares Yuko's text message that never got sent to him. The tsunami is tremendous. Thinking about that great big unknown facing us, because we might not ever encounter something like that, but then thinking about the great unknown that we are in right now, in this time that we're living in, might I ask you both to meditate on Mr. Takamatsu and Yuko's story and how it resonates today as we think ahead, as we kind of ponder about that in this time, whether there was any resonance with each of you.
For me, I think with the pandemic going on and thinking about Mr. Takamatsu's life over the last 10 years as well, um, it it made me, appreciate my loved ones, making sure I spend as much time as I can with them. Um, yeah, and also sometimes thinking about what is important in life, and finding that right balance of things, and sometimes not trying not to get too upset over first world problems, those kind of stuff, which is usually the most of the problems we have on a daily basis. But I'm generally, yeah, I don't get too upset with things, so yeah, but I think hopefully this pandemic will go away soon so that we all can head over to Japan and visit Mr. Takamatsu.
And what about you, Miki?
Yes, I agree with Wesley. And, you know, we all went through a difficult time. And then, in Melbourne, we had the very hard and long lockdown as well. And then, we couldn't go out maybe once a day for supermarket, but only one person from the household and only 5 kilometers from your house. And it's, you know, and it can't see friends. Um, just don't know when you kind of have these difficulties, like, you never knew that when earthquake and tsunami happened back then, and we didn't know how this corona COVID-19 hit us so hard. So I learned that, to appreciate what we have, and the small things like just having a coffee with friends, and then just going out for drive into a nice park, and that small things. I just realized that we tend to forget what we have every day. So and then going through the difficult time, but Mr. Takamatsu told us that how we need to be strong and get that hope to go through, and then hold hands together and cooperate. Then we can, he showed us we can do it together and never lose hope. So it helped us this time, I think.
No, thank you for that. For the sharing on that. I have one more question to ask in as we keep to this kind of reflective moment and tone. Before I go to the Q&As, there are some questions that have come in. Uh, just looking back at that process and of the novel, were there any regrets? Not regrets, of in that way. But I guess, were there any question you wish you had asked, or something you could or should have done that has not made its way into the book, or whether in the friendship or relationship with Mr. Takamatsu, or anything of to that effect?
For me, I do have one regret. I wish when we went to Onagawa to meet Mr. Takamatsu, we gave him a gift, a small gift. And now looking back at it, I wish I gave him something else, because we gave him this like
Top Gun.
Top Gun laser disc or something like that, because he liked Top Gun at the time. And now when I think about it, is he must think I'm crazy. So he must think, what's wrong with this guy? So, but yeah, but it's a cute present. So I wish I got him something a bit more useful. So that's one regrets I have.
Okay, Miki, anything?
Um, no, not really, but um, now after I went through all that journey, and I'm thinking that maybe I should have paid more attention to a lot of things. I could have taken more photos. I could have talked to Mr. Takamatsu more, all sorts of things. But yeah, I was above that. I was quite happy with that journey.
Thank you so much, both of you for indulging me with my questions as well this afternoon so far, and asking you some tough questions. Not really. Uh, I'm gonna turn to some of the questions that our audience has asked us, and then let's see. For those of you who have more questions, please feel free to drop in. We'll try to answer as many as we can. Yeah. So one of the questions we have from Ting Zheyin is a question for Miki. As a translator during the trip, you played an essential role in message delivery. Was there any situation when Mr. Takamatsu responded to Wesley's question, or in his sharing of his stories, that you felt emotionally overwhelmed? And if so, at which point of that story or aspect of the journey in which it occurred?
Um, yes, there was. When Wesley asked the last question for that day, just before wrapping up at Mr. Takamatsu's home, that he asked if he could pass Yuko a message, what would that be? And then I was quite, it really cut my heart. But his answer was, he just wanted to tell her that he's doing fine, the family's doing fine, and asking her where she is. And it's in the book, Wesley said I was, holding back my tears, but after I'd done my interpreting work, I couldn't hold my tears. It was I felt really sorry. It was not quite professional to cry, but it really I felt that in my heart.
And this moment was also captured in the documentary. Am I right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, it's in the trailer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the trailer. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes.
Okay. Wow. Uh, Wesley, any response to that? Whether you wanted to respond to Mickey, but
Um, no, not in the moment. But Miki did
okay.
a terrific job with the translation and everything. Like, really thankful for
Yeah,
her.
Mickey. I mean, from the same audience member, were there any instances in which Mr. Takamatsu preferred to not address or inform you that he felt uncomfortable responding to some of Wesley's questions?
No, no. He answered every questions that Wesley had, so he was quite cooperative.
Yeah, and for Wesley, did you feel he was had always been kind of open and forthcoming with you from the very beginning?
Yes, definitely. But it took us a while. When we're talking about email, it took us a while to ask the slightly more sensitive or more emotional questions. So it took a few months or weeks before we did that. Prior to that, we were talking more about everyday things, asking more about his background, about his childhood, and things like that. At the end of the day, I find Mr. Takamatsu to be he's a pretty quiet person, not like loud, but he is willing to share. But you probably need to ask him first. He's probably won't share it with you just openly like that. So it took a while for us to think about the right questions to ask him, and also thinking about the sensitivities, about the questions that we're asking, and making sure we're not asking questions that would make him feel uncomfortable, because we wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you. So the next question we have is from Mehan Hui. And the question is, hi guys, I found I Want to Go Home such a compelling story. Will you ever return to Mr. Takamatsu and write a follow-up or create a more extensive documentary? We touched on this briefly just now, but I think, have you had thoughts about that, Wesley?
I did think about it, but I did think about not a sequel to Mr. Takamatsu, but I was thinking about the other stories that were in Onagawa that's
Hmm.
interesting as well. So that was on my mind for a while, but it's not something I pursued. Yeah, but I think yeah, I don't think we'll do a sequel to I Want to Go Home. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have one more question, and this is from Holly Jin Aruzu, who you might know, I guess. What is Mr. So we were talking earlier about the both of you kind of sharing very recently with Mr. Takamatsu about how things have been, right? And with this
Mm.
current Light Tonight project as well. What has been his response to the art house's Light Tonight endeavor and the public interest over his journey as revealed through the book?
So he I understand that I think he likes the open books event, because he's been clicking like on the Facebook posts that I will share, or the events, and we send him images, and he has a good response to that. Other than that, he's actually been really busy over the last 10 years, not just with his diving, but also with other forms of media reaching out to him. There was like the last I spoke to him at some point, I think he told me there was a drama show where one of the characters is inspired by him. So it's a Japanese drama. I can't remember the name of the show, but yeah. So, and then I think recently when Miki translated one of his messages, he also shared that he's been receiving a lot of media attention recently as well, especially with it being the 10th year of the tsunami tragedy. So I think there's been a lot more. He's been busy. He's been a busy man. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that he is still diving, right?
Yes, he still dives. Correct.
Yeah, every week still.
Yeah, once or every week or every 2 weeks. Correct. Because
Right,
he
right.
shares images of his search as well on social media sometimes, with him and his the team that he's a part of. So we get to see some of the wreckage or things that they find under the sea.
Wow, and but that's been on his personal kind of social media channels as opposed to like a website or.
Ah, yes, correct. Yeah.
Sure, sure. It's okay. Maybe one day, you'll be able to share both of you share with us more about his kind of future journeys as well. I think we'd be curious to know,
Mm.
as much as maybe not a sequel, but I think many who have read and followed might be kind of yeah would want to know about Mr. Takamatsu. Yeah. I have one final question, and this is from Martini. What aspects of Mr. Takamatsu's story and your takeaways from the experience do you find relevant today?
Mm. What aspects of Mr. Takamatsu's story I find relevant today? Um, I I I feel like his story is pretty timeless almost. Like the story and his inspiring story he has to share. So even without this pandemic happening, his story still shines through. With it being the 10th year of the tsunami tragedy, I think there's a bit more of a focus on what happened 10 years ago as well. So I think there's a lot of reflection about what happened back then, and also seeing as to the point of 10 years later, how different are things now. For me, I'll be interested to find out it's not really related, but I'm interested to find out like what are the tsunami safety evacuation regulations like now as opposed to 10 years ago? Are there any differences now? Are the coastal areas of Japan more prepared for similar kind of natural disasters? So that's something I'm interested to find out. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very interesting thing to be finding out about, right? The progress of that, and Mickey, maybe something that you feel is still relevant today, or maybe even what Wesley was just sharing about, something that you would like to know more about since.
Um, yeah, Mr. Takamatsu showed us that that hope and strength for us. So whatever we go through nowadays, COVID-19 or anything else, even the personal difficulties or family, anything, just tell us how we can stand strong and never give up. In terms of what Wesley was saying just now about how things changed or not, I think we had lots of big earthquakes in Japan after the 2011. But I think they learned a lot and then a lot of precautions. I don't know in detail, but I could feel that how people learn to help each other like they did back then in 2011. Like I definitely saw more people reaching out and trying to support those people and the victims in the area. So that's a good positive move, I think.
Yep. Thank you so much, Wesley and Miki. Not just for today, but also introducing us to Mr. Takamatsu and his journey and his story. And that also has also been a part of our now what is our singlet canon as well. And I hope that story will continue as you both have shared today. Resonate with a lot more of us in time to come. I'm going to wrap it up, but before we go, just wanted to share with everyone, if you haven't already check out what's going on at the Arts House. You have the installation that is happening at the front porch of the Arts House by Muralingo. And this installation will be there until the 28th of February. So you still have some time to go and check things out for yourself over there. There is also an audio experience of called Dream, The Last Message and Afterlife. And these are excerpts from the novel itself and by Artwave Studio. And I think Wesley has recorded that and has read that out, which you can check out on the art. No. That you can check out on the art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not
you know,
my
and
voice,
that's
yeah, but it sounds like me.
it sounds a lot like you, Wesley.
Yeah, it does.
And that's available on the Arts House website. It's an online program, or on Spotify as well. And of course, this afternoon, this has been in conversation with Wesley, Leona Aroozoo, and Miki Hawkinson. And I thank all of you who have joined us this afternoon, or if you're joining us a little later and watching this on demand, thank you so much for joining us.